Mr. Leech, Major General Tremblay, Brigadier General Friday, distinguished guests, inductee family members and friends, RMC alumni, officer cadets, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2016 Wall of Honour Annual Induction Ceremony. Bienvenue à la cérémonie d'intronisation annuelle de 2016 au mur d'honneur. I am 27384 Naval Cadet Nguyen, and I will be your Master of Ceremony today. Mon nom est 27384, l'aspirant de marine Nguyen, et je serai votre maître de cérémonie aujourd'hui. Before we begin, please note that your programs are written in both French and English, so that you may follow along in the language of your choice. The citations will be read in alternating English and French paragraphs. Avant de commencer, veuillez noter que vos programmes sont écrits en anglais et en français pour vous permettre de suivre la cérémonie selon la langue de votre choix. Par contre, les citations ne seront lues qu'une fois, alternant entre l'anglais et le français. I also wish to remind you of the reception following the ceremony for all attendees in the Military Personnel Generation HQ foyer just up the walkway and to your left. Washrooms can be found in the same area. Nous vous rappelons qu'une réception pour tous suivra la cérémonie dans le vestibule du QG de la génération du personnel militaire en remontant le passage puis vers votre gauche. Les toilettes se trouvent au même endroit. J'invite maintenant notre commandant 16855, le brigadier général Sean Friday, à nous adresser la parole. Monsieur.
Saturday, Major General Tremblay, Honorary Colonel Leech, a family of Lieutenant General Simonds and Mr. Kennedy representing the Lamontagne family, fellow and former serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Mesdames, Messieurs, and cadets, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us today at the Royal Military College of Canada for our 2016 Wall of Honour induction ceremony. And we opened our doors here at the Royal Military College 140 years ago with the vision of generating officers that would serve with distinction in the Canadian Armed Forces. And since that time and up to and including today, we have been doing just that. A few short months ago, we graduated 220 new officers that left to go and serve with that distinction in the Royal Canadian Navy, Canadian Army, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. And we have 1,000 more of Canada's finest just brimming and budding with excellence that we here have the privilege and the deep duty of care to develop to their full potential. This Wall of Honour is the ultimate validation of what this great Canadian institution is striving to accomplish and has accomplished since 1876. That is, training and educating great leaders who will go on to serve Canada within the profession of arms. Le mur d'honneur a été érigé et offert au Collège en 2008 par la promotion de 1963 lors de l'entrée de celle-ci dans la vieille brigade, un événement qui marque le 50e anniversaire des débuts d'une promotion au Collège. Le mur a été érigé pour reconnaître les réalisations et les contributions exceptionnelles des anciens élèves officiers des collèges militaires royaux et d'autres membres de l'équipe des collèges, au service du Canada et du reste du monde. And I would like to thank the class of 63, and in particular Captain Navy Ted Davey, for his significant dedication in enabling every year's induction ceremony, and Mr. Peter Watson and the Wall of Honour Board for their continued efforts in selecting honorees that are the epitome of what this institution represents, exemplary service to our country. So thank you very much, Ted. Thank you very much, Peter, and the entire committee for everything you do. Now, as our ceremony proceeds, you will hear in greater detail about the excellence of each of our inductees, but I would like to take the time now to introduce this year's incredible selectees. And they are College number 1596, Lieutenant General Guy Simonds, who is represented by his many family members here in attendance. Lieutenant General Simonds is a decorated Canadian soldier and widely regarded as the most effective corps-level commander in the entire Allied forces in Normandy during World War II. Lieutenant General Simonds has also earned several dedications and awards, including Companion of the Order of Canada. H15200, Honorary Colonel, the Honorable Joseph Gilles Lamontagne, is a distinguished Canadian whose exceptional life of service saw several prominent appointments, including first chairman of the RMC Board of Governors, Minister of National Defense, and Lieutenant Governor of Quebec. Honorary Colonel Lamontagne was recognized with numerous decorations and awards, and including the Officer of the Order of Canada. And College number 7771, Honorary Colonel Jim Leech. Jim is renowned for his outstanding work as President and CEO of the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, having led it to become one of the world's leading private equity investors. A leader, an innovator, and a community builder. Among his many significant achievements, he was also a founding director of Right to Play International. Honorary Colonel Leech is a member of the Order of Canada and is currently the Chancellor of Queen's University. Les trois personnes intronisées ici aujourd'hui reçoivent ce témoignage de reconnaissance pour leur profonde intégrité et leur excellence professionnelle. Comme toutes les personnes ainsi mises à l'honneur, ils sont une source d'inspiration pour nous tous. Leur exemple nous invite à nous surpasser constamment et nous rappelle quelle influence nous pouvons avoir sur le cours des choses si nous travaillons avec acharnement et que nous employons nos talents au service de la planète. As Commandant, I am privileged to join with you all to bear witness to the induction of these three exceptional leaders at today's Wall of Honour ceremony. Our Royal Military College of Canada is truly honored to count them as our own and to recognize them as outstanding Canadians who have truly exemplified our enduring motto of Truth, Duty, Valour. Thank you very much.
The citations of the three inductees this year will now be read, followed by the unveiling of their respective plaques. Nous allons maintenant lire les citations de nos trois personnes intronisées et dévoiler leurs plaques respectives. Before reading the Simonds citation, I would like to introduce the members of his family that are present. Daughter, the Reverend Canon Ruth Smith. Son, 3521 Colonel Retired Charles. And grandson, 12616 Colonel Retired Chris, and his family. Thank you for joining us, and may I ask you all to please stand.
Born in England in 1903, Guy Simonds immigrated with his family to Victoria, BC in 1912. He attended Ashbury College in Ottawa before entering RMC in 1921, when his driving characteristic as a highly principled person was already evident. He scored second on the last national selection exam administered for the college. On graduation in 1925, Simonds was awarded the Sword of Honour, the Victor Vandersmyssen Award, and the Governor General's Silver Medal. Après RMC, Simonds a reçu son brevet d'officier dans l'artillerie royale canadienne. Il a servi d'abord avec la batterie B du RCHA à Kingston et ensuite avec la batterie C à Winnipeg. Il a alors été sélectionné pour le Long Gunnery Staff Course au Royaume-Uni, après lequel il a servi brièvement à Kingston et est retourné au Royaume-Uni au Collège d'état-major à Camberley. Promu major, il est retourné à RMC comme professeur associé d'artillerie et plus tard comme instructeur en tactique. On mobilization in 1939, Simonds was appointed GCSO-2 with the 1st Canadian Infantry Division, was back in the UK before the year's end. In 1941, he was named Brigadier General Staff, 1st Canadian Corps, and in 1942, Commander, 1st Canadian Infantry Brigade. For outstanding zeal and ability, he was made a Commander of the Order of the British Empire, CBE. Tôt en 1943, il a été promu Major Général et nommé commandant de la 2e Division canadienne d'infanterie. Il a bientôt été transféré pour commander la 1re division canadienne d'infanterie pour l'invasion de la Sicile et ensuite de l'Italie. Pour sa hardiesse, son efficacité et son exemple inspirant en Sicile, il a reçu l'ordre de service distingué, DSO. À ce moment, il était le plus jeune Canadien à diriger une division en bataille. Plus tard, il a dirigé la 5e division blindée en Italie jusqu'à la fin de l'année. In January 1944, Simonds was promoted to Lieutenant General and returned to England as General Officer commanding 2 Canadian Corps. He led the formation in battle in Normandy, and for his organizing ability of the highest order, skillful execution, and resolute leadership, he was made a Companion of the Order of the Bath, CB. in the field by King George VI. He continued to lead the 2nd Canadian Corps on the advances through Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. De septembre à novembre 1944, comme commandant intermédiaire de la première armée canadienne, Simonds a dirigé des batailles critiques pour dégager l'estuaire de l'Escaut, après quoi il a retourné à son commandement du 2e corps canadien. Simonds is credited with inventing the Allied version of the armored personnel carrier in 1944. It was said of him that he was one of the more outstanding Allied Corps commanders in Europe, a dour, direct officer who brought unusual imagination to bear on every operational plan for which he was responsible. He created one of the most effective tank infantry teams in the Allied forces through a high degree of improvisation, versatile, and imaginative. Simonds received military honors from France, Belgium, the Netherlands, the USA, and Poland. Après la guerre, il a servi comme instituteur-chef au Imperial Defense College London, de 1946 à 1949, commandant à la fois du Collège de la Défense nationale et de la Collège d'état-major de l'armée canadienne à Kingston, de 1949 à 1951, et chef d'état-major général de 1951 à 1955. During his time as CGS, Lieutenant General Simonds oversaw the formation and training of the Canadian 25th Brigade for service in the Korean War, and the 27th Brigade for service with NATO in Europe. He also created a rotational system to ensure the Canadian formations on active duty were reinforced and replenished with Canadian-based units. Durant sa retraite, le lieutenant général Simonds a travaillé dans les affaires et pour des organisations charitables, notamment la Halifax Insurance Company, la Société royale de sauvetage Canada, le Gurkha Appeal, le Corps canadien des commissionnaires et le Ballet national. Il a servi comme colonel honoraire du Royal Regiment of Canada de 1960 jusqu'à sa mort en 1974. Lieutenant General Simonds spoke publicly to inform Canadians on defense matters. He argued that nuclear arms and missiles would not obviate the need for strong conventional forces. He also argued that integration was the right move for Canada, but not unification, as was done in the late 1960s. En tant que sa subalterne en 1932, Simonds a dû demander une permission spéciale pour se marier, ce qu'il a fait. Lui et Catherine ont eu 2 enfants, Ruth en 1933 et Charles en 1934. En 1960, il a marié Dorothy Sinclair. In 1970, Lieutenant General Simonds was made a Companion of the Order of Canada for a lifetime of military service to Canada. He died 4 years later. Plaque inscription: Scholar, Soldier, Army Commander in Battle, Chief of the General Staff, Volunteer. I'd now like to welcome up Charlie and Ruth to reveal the plaque.
Malheureusement, M. Lamontagne est décédé en juin. Aucun de ses 3 enfants ne peut être avec nous aujourd'hui. Pour présenter la famille Lamontagne, nous avons 12570 Mike Kennedy, un bon ami du fils Michel. Merci de vous être joint à nous et puis-je vous demander de vous lever s'il vous plaît.
Gilles Lamontagne est né à Montréal en 1919, le plus jeune d'une famille de 5 enfants. Il a fait ses études au collège Jean de Brébeuf et à l'école des hautes études commerciales pour se préparer à une carrière dans le monde des affaires. En mai 1941, comme la Seconde Guerre mondiale faisait rage et que la situation des Alliés était très sombre, Gilles a mis fin à ses études et s'est porté volontaire pour servir dans l'aviation royale canadienne. Devenu pilote de bombardier, il s'est rendu en Grande-Bretagne pour se joindre à la 425e escadrille de bombardiers, les Alouettes, composée en majorité de francophones. En 1943, au retour d'un raid sur Essen, en Allemagne, son appareil Wellington a pris feu à la suite d'une attaque par un chasseur ennemi. Il a réussi à maintenir son vol assez longtemps pour permettre à son équipage de sauter en parachute. Lui-même a sauté le dernier. Tous ont survécu. Pour cette action, il a été cité à la liste d'honneur du roi George VI et est demeuré prisonnier de guerre de 1943 à 1945. À son retour au Canada, c'est à Québec que M. Lamontagne s'est installé où il a démarré une entreprise d'importation couronnée de succès. En 1962, il a servi à s'impliquer dans la politique municipale. D'abord échevin durant 3 ans, puis maire de Québec de 1965 à 1977. Et s'est appliqué à mettre fin à la corruption qui régnait dans la ville, à améliorer la salubrité et à réaliser de nombreux travaux publics. Depuis, durant 7 ans, Il s'est activement impliqué dans les conseils d'administration de la Fédération canadienne des maires et municipalités, de l'Union des municipalités du Québec. Même après avoir quitté son poste de maire, les citoyens qui le rencontraient dans la rue l'appelaient encore avec révérence « Monsieur le maire ». De 1977 à 1984, il a participé à la politique fédérale en tant que député des postes 16 mois, ministre de la Défense nationale 3 ans et demi, en même temps que le ministre intérimaire des anciens combattants 1 an. Durant ses 22 ans de vie politique et municipale, il n'a jamais perdu une élection. C'est en 1984 qu'il a quitté la politique pour devenir lieutenant-gouverneur du Québec, poste qu'il a occupé durant 6 ans. Durant ce mandat, il a reçu plusieurs distinctions honorifiques pour souligner l'ensemble de sa carrière. L'Ordre de Saint-Jean de Jérusalem, la Médaille des Nations Unies et 2 doctorats honorifiques des collèges militaires de Kingston et de Saint-Jean. En 1990, il a été fait aussi de l'Ordre du Canada pour avoir consacré plus de 30 ans au service du pays. De 1987 à 1996, il a occupé la fonction de colonel honoraire du 401e escadron de l'aviation royale canadienne à Saint-Hubert. Il a été membre du conseil d'administration de l'Université Laval de 1991 à 1996. D'autres organisations ont aussi profité de son expérience. La Chambre de commerce de Québec, le Conseil économique du Canada, l'Opération Nez Rouge et le Centre de la famille de la base militaire de Valcartier, durant plus de 15 ans. De 1991 à 2006, il a œuvré comme consultant en affaires publiques. In 1997, the Minister of National Defense named him chairman of the RMCC Board of Governors. This newly formed board had, as part of its initial task, to ensure the full implementation and recommendation from the report of the Commission of Inquiry during the deployment of Canadian forces in Somalia. To this end, the Board of Governors set up a committee, chaired by H2951 General Retired Ramsey Whitner, which spent 3 years examining the undergraduate program of RMCC and produced the Whitner's report. En 2000, M. Lamontagne a reçu la plus haute distinction honorifique décernée par le gouvernement du Québec, soit l'Ordre national du Québec, pour reconnaître sa contribution politique exceptionnelle au niveau municipal et fédéral. La Chambre de commerce de l'industrie de Québec l'a nommé à l'Académie des grands Québécois en 2005. In 2006, among other Canadian servicemen, he was made a Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur by France for courage and exemplary conduct during the battles of the liberation of France and Europe. En 2008, M. Gilles Lamontagne et les 2 autres maires qui lui ont succédé à la ville de Québec, Jean Pétier et Jean-Paul Lallier, ont reçu en même temps la médaille de la ville de Québec pour souligner la remarquable continuité entre eux durant 40 ans. En 2011, il a reçu la mention élogieuse du ministre des Anciens combattants en reconnaissance de sa participation dans la collectivité et à travers le Québec. En 2012, il a aussi reçu la médaille Jubilé de diamant de la reine Élisabeth II. He was married to Mary Schaeffer for 57 years, until her death. He wrote about his wife, her loyalty and beneficial sharing made her an extraordinary companion. She was the source which inspired me, which embellished my life, and completed my action. They had 4 children. Monsieur Lamontagne died in June 2016. Inscription sur la plaque. Pilote de bombardier, homme d'affaires, politicien, lieutenant-gouverneur du Québec, conseiller à la défense. J'inviterai maintenant M. Kennedy à venir découvrir la plaque.
Finally, we honor our living 2016 inductee, 7771 Honorary Colonel Jim Leech. With him today are his wife, Deb Barrett, daughter Jennifer Cummings, 4 grandchildren, Sydney, Travis, Cedar, and Aurora, and his big brother, 6268 Major General Retired John Leech, plus many members of his Queens and Signal Corps families. May I ask you all to please stand.
After school in Kingston, Ottawa, Camp Petawawa, and Edmonton, Jim Leech attended Royal Roads and RMC, graduating in 1968 with a Bachelor's of Science with honors in mathematics and physics. He was cadet wing commander in his 2nd year at Rhodes, competed on the intercollegiate skiing and water polo teams, and received the H.E. Seller Award for Outstanding Graduate and the Canadian Army Award. Jim played intercollegiate rugby and was a cadet squadron leader at RMC, where he received the Commonwealth Cup, the Royal Canadian Corps Signals Trophy, the National Defense Award of Merit, and RMC Club Prize. Jim grew up in a military family. His father, Brigadier General George Leech, and uncle, Lieutenant General Don Lobman, were career officers. His older brother, Major General John Leech, graduated from RMC in 1964. Immédiatement après l'obtention de son diplôme, Jim a complété le cours de subalterne du Corps royal canadien de transmission, gagnant le trophée Jimmy accordé au meilleur étudiant. Il a été muté au 1er bataillon royal 22e régiment en Allemagne et ensuite au quartier général du 4e groupe brigade mécanisée Canada. Il a retourné au 1er bataillon royal 22e régiment comme officier des transmissions du bataillon en 1970. Following his release from the Canadian Forces, Jim was awarded several scholarships for the MBA program at Queen's University, where he was elected class president. Upon graduation at the top of his class, he joined Commerce Capital Corporation, a financial services and real estate company, and over the next 6 years, held increasingly senior positions in Montreal, Calgary, and Toronto as the company grew through acquisitions. En 1979, Jim s'est joint à Unicor Canada Corporation, une société active dans les domaines de l'énergie, des services financiers, de l'immobilier et des banques d'affaires. Il a dirigé la stratégie d'acquisition agressive d'Unicor aux États-Unis et au Canada et a été nommé président en 1983. Suite à l'acquisition de Union Energy Incorporation, Jim a aussi été nommé président directeur général d'Union, où il a supervisé sa transformation en une des plus grandes sociétés intégrées d'énergie en Amérique du Nord. During the 1990s, Jim focused his acquisition and operating experience on technology industry, leading 2 companies through their early startup phase. In 2001, Jim was recruited to establish Teachers Private Capital as the private investing arm of the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. After successfully building Teachers Private Capital into one of the world's largest private investors, Jim was appointed president and CEO of Teachers. When he retired in 2014, Teachers was Canada's largest single profession pension plan, responsible for investing $150 billion for 310,000 teachers. It was recognized as the world's leading pension organization and ranked first in the world for investment performance and client service. Jim a reçu la médaille de Jubilee de diamant de la Reine en 2012 en reconnaissance de son travail avec la fondation True Patriot Love. En 2013, il a co-rédigé The Third Rail, Confronting Our Pension Failures, un best-seller qui a reçu le National Business Book Award de 2014. In 2014, Jim was a member of Canada's largest expedition to ski to the magnetic North Pole in order to raise awareness and funds for Canadian military veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. He was invested as a member of the Order of Canada in 2014 for his contributions as an innovator in pension management, his writing on retirement funding, and his community involvement. En 2016, Jim est chancelier de l'Université Queen's, conseiller supérieur chez McKinsey & Company, président du conseil d'administration de Toronto General and Western Hospital Foundation, président du conseil de la MasterCard Foundation, colonel honoraire du 32e régiment de transmission et administrateur fondateur de Right to Play International. Jim est marié à Deborah Barrett, CA, chef des services financiers chez The Woodbridge Company Limited. Ils ont 3 enfants, Jennifer Cumming, Joanna Thiessen, and Andrew Leech. Plusieurs petits-enfants font le bonheur. Plaque inscription: Scholar, Athlete, International Business Builder, Volunteer Leader. I would like to invite Mr. Leech to come unveil your plaque.
What a gorgeous day. General Tremblay, General Friday, Wall of Honor benefactors, family members and representatives of my fellow inductees, members of the cadet wing, family, friends, mesdames et messieurs, bonjour à tous et à toutes. I'd like to thank the members of the selection committee for honoring us today. To be included in the same company as my two fellow inductees and these 24 giants who have preceded us is quite humbling. Permettez-moi de commencer par aborder les réalisations considérables de mes co-membres. As you learn from his citation, General Guy Granville Simonds was best known as the youngest Canadian to lead a division into battle. In fact, at age 41, he was purported to be the youngest corps commander in the British Empire and one of the more outstanding Allied corps commanders during the Second World War. It is amazing to think that he rose from the rank of major to major general in just 3.5 years. That's shorter than your time at the college. In total, General Simonds spent 6 years at RMC. No, he wasn't a repeater. He was in the very first cadet class that was required to study for 4 years. In his final year, he was awarded the Sword of Honour, judged the best all-rounder, placed second academically, and was generally considered the best horseman in the class. I'm not sure what the equivalent of horseman would be today. Then, before the outbreak of World War II, he returned to RMC for 2 years as an associate professor in artillery and then an instructor in tactics. In his book, The Normandy Campaign, Victor Brooks lists Simonds as the most effective corps-level commander for the Allied forces in Normandy. He wrote, and I quote, "The corps commander among the units that comprised the 21st Army Group, who most likely had the largest personal impact on the Normandy campaign, was Lieutenant General Guy Simonds. This senior officer of the 2nd Canadian Corps created one of the most effective tank infantry teams in the Allied forces through a high degree of improvisation during the drive from Caen to Falaise." In preparing these remarks, I was looking for a personal connection to General Simonds. Despite our very different careers, wouldn't it be neat if there was some common thread? So, through the power of Wikipedia, I found the connection under family background. The fact is, we're both Army brats. His great-grandfather, grandfather, and father had all served in His or Her Majesty's Armed Forces. His siblings were pilots, and his sister worked for the Admiralty. For me, it was my grandfather, my father, my uncle, and my brother. But whereas in our family the tradition ended with John and me, in the Simonds family it carried on for at least two more generations through his son Charles and grandson Chris, both of whom are here today, and with any luck, William, the next generation who has applied to join the armed forces. The other connection, interestingly enough, is a framed photograph of General Simonds together with our father that hung in my dad's home office. That is an indication of the level of regard with which our father held Guy Simonds. I looked for it last week but couldn't find it, but I'll keep looking. It is said that General Simonds was known as an innovative and hard-driving commander with a great deal of self-confidence and even a degree of arrogance. He was tough and focused on execution. So a lesson to you cadets. It's okay to have the right dose of confidence, if rightly earned through experience, and ego, to sustain you through tough times. That doesn't mean you should suck out all the oxygen every time you enter the room, but it does help to conduct yourself with an appropriate degree of gravitas when warranted. Final interesting factoid, Wikipedia states that General Simonds was offered an honorary degree from RMC which he declined, as he had opposed the degree program from the start, fearing the long tenure of civilian instructors would unduly influence the curriculum. A great example of living by your principles. Pour l'honorable Gilles Lamontagne, la route de ce mur d'honneur a commencé d'un droit différent, en ce qu'il n'a jamais été un élève officier qui a été obligé de jouer les tours à la place de Ressemblant. Il était plus intelligent que ça. Il a obtenu ses 2 diplômes collège militaire basés sur son courageux au temps de guerre et de service à la ville de Québec, à sa province de Québec et au Canada. Gilles' family were unable to attend today, but they're represented by a family friend, 12570 Mike Kennedy, and I almost got you there. My last two digits are 71. As you heard in his citation, Honorary Colonel Lamontagne had been shot down and imprisoned towards the end of the war. In doing my research, I discovered that Historica Canada had created a memory project interview with him about this incident. So here's the transcript of what happened in his own words with my poor translation. J'ai fait le raid sur Essen en Allemagne. Les Allemands m'ont accroché. Ils sont revenus à 3 reprises. La première fois, ils ont mitraillé et ils ont blessé mon gunner arrière. Il est venu au bout d'entendre le feu. Le feu avait pris. Il est revenu une deuxième fois. Il nous a réellement accrochés. Mon navigateur a été blessé. L'avion a réellement pris en feu. C'était une torche. La plus grande peur que j'avais étant pilote et capitaine, c'était que l'avion explose. Je dois faire sortir tout le monde avant de sortir moi-même. Le plus dangereux dans l'avion lorsqu'il y a une attaque, c'est l'explosion. Si l'avion explose, c'est tout fini. Elle n'a pas explosé, mais c'était une torche. Comme ça fait, je ne sais pas. My rear gunner turned his turret and managed to free his parachute, and he jumped. But the wireless operator was really injured. We opened the hatch below that was blocked, and we pushed him out. Fortunately, it opened. After that, we each jumped out one by one. I jumped last. J'ai descendu en parachute. On était en dessous de la Hollande. On était juste avant l'arrivée à Zuiderzee, le Grand Lac. Je suis attiré dans un champ et j'ai enterré mon parachute et ma main ouest, selon des instructions que nous avons reçues. I looked around. I saw a farm that was not very far away and decided to go and hide in his barn. I didn't know what to do. I decided to wait until the morning because it was 2 or 3 o'clock. Dawn would come and I'd decide what to do, so I lay down in the hay. De bonne heure le matin, 2 enfants d'environ 4 ou 5 ans sont entrés et ils m'ont vu. Ils sont partis à courir pour voir leurs parents. Je ne sais pas ce qu'ils ont dit. Je ne comprenais rien car ils ne parlaient ni anglais ni le français. Ils comprenaient l'hollandaise, c'était tout. Le père est arrivé avec un gros fusil de chasse. Je lui ai dit « Bonjour » et il ne m'a pas donné la main. Il m'a fasciné de rester là. He could clearly see that I was one of the fellows who had been flying overhead the night before. He came back with some cheese, which he gave me to eat. I thought maybe I was getting lucky. But a half an hour later, I heard cars approaching and the sounds of doors slamming. Je pensais que j'étais fichu. Des Allemands sont arrivés. Raus und schnell. Ça veut dire debout et vite. Ils m'ont embarqué dans l'auto. Ils m'ont emmené à Amsterdam, environ une centaine de milles, et ils m'ont mis en prison. C'était la première place que je suis allé. In the 1980s, I received a call from the Dutch ambassador. He told me that the sons of the farmer wanted to receive me as their guest. So I went. They had decorated the village. They were happy to see me again. It was not the same welcome I had received back in the day. I understood. If the Germans had found them to be helping me, the entire family would have been shot on the spot. There were no trials. I understood. I would have saved my 2 children instead of some louse like me. It was extraordinary. Pretty matter of fact, given the circumstances. In June of this year, when Honorary Colonel Lamontagne died, he was recognized as a hero, a builder, and a statesman. But for all of Quebec, he will always be remembered as Monsieur le Maire. Your second inductee exemplifies cool under fire during wartime and in politics and the concept of serving others. Now, I was told that in my address I'm supposed to make a connection between we honorees our experience through our military time and what we accomplished in our afterlife. In the case of General Simonds and the Honorable Gilles Lamontagne, distinguished war records and military or political careers at the highest level in our country. And in my case, a business career mixed with community service. Each of our stories would be different, influenced by what was going on around us at the time. So I'll only speak in detail about my own journey. But I assure you that each of our stories would also have common themes. What we learned and what we experienced during our college or military years stayed with us, and in fact gave us a leg up in our after years. Now, over the years, I've come to subscribe to a theory that you are what you were. And what I mean by that is, if you really want to understand someone, including yourself, understand how they will react in any given situation or what their values are, it helps to know what they have experienced or learned in life, what they've been through. No two of us are the same. We are the product of our own unique circumstances. Believe me, a person born into a privileged family who never had to have a summer or part-time job and attended an elite private school does not have the same frame of reference as an orphan Chinese boat refugee who held 2 part-time jobs to pay their way through school. 2 extreme examples, and I'm not suggesting that one is better than the other. What I am suggesting is that their values, how they will react in various situations, will largely be guided by their individual experiences. And those learnings grow every year. If, for example, they share 4 years of experiences at Royal Military College, then slowly their inventory of learnings will start to converge, but they will never be identical. Okay, so let's test my theory on my case. As I said, I started life as an Army brat. My father was a senior officer, and we moved every 2 years through to the end of high school. In most places where we lived, all of the fathers of every one of my classmates were under my father's command. At times it felt as though I had a big sign on my forehead, the old man's kid. And don't think that didn't make me a potential target on the sports field. So what were the lessons? Now, I learned to live where we lived at that moment and never be nostalgic, to make new friendships easily, such that without trying, I established a network all over Canada. I also learned to be flexible and to roll with the times. I learned discretion. What my father said at the dinner table stayed in the house. I had to fit in, to camouflage the fact that I was the general's kid. And another consequence was that due to changing school systems, I got ahead of my peers and graduated from high school at age 16. All of those learnings influenced my behaviors today. Then I moved to RMC. I was the youngest in my class. I had no idea what to study, so I signed up for what I was told was the hardest, honors, math, and physics. My brother had preceded me at Rhodes. He was the captain of the rugby team and the heavyweight boxing champion. I weighed 135 pounds and was clearly not able to live up to expectations in those areas. In second year, I was 18. I was cadet wing commander, reporting to a general with 300 cadets reporting to me, 130 of which were peers in the class and sports field. What did I learn? I learned to manage up, down, and sideways. I learned to live and play with peers at the same time as being their leader. I learned to multitask, balance academics, sports, military, and some semblance of a social life. Then came my life in the Army, something many of you will face very shortly. I was young. I graduated as a newly minted 20-year-old RC SIGs officer and was immediately posted to Europe with the Premier Bataillon Royal 22e Regiment. I later became the battalion communications officer, which meant that I worked simultaneously in French and English. Only problem was I didn't speak French fluently. I had to resolve that quickly if I wanted to gain the confidence of my commanding officer, fellow officers and soldiers, and any potential girlfriends. Another complicating factor was that my brother had held that same position for 4 years earlier, and he had been really successful and popular. All eyes were on the kid brother this time. Side lesson, it's tough to follow a high-achieving older brother. Pick your predecessor carefully. It's easier to follow a screw-up. What were my learnings? This was my first real-life leadership position. These soldiers and NCOs were not like me and my fellow cadets. They were trained. They knew what they were doing. But they were also much older and had families and issues in their lives to which I, as a young man, barely in my 20s, could hardly relate. I was given a lot of responsibility, which taught me disciplined problem solving. I learned the experience of being a minority, une tête carrée parmi les Canadiens français. Managed up and down with much higher consequences. I learned the world was bigger than Canada. I saw a lot through our military exercises, and on our time off, we took every opportunity to explore the four corners of Europe and the Mediterranean. Clearly, this is where I developed my interest in becoming globally engaged. Finally, I learned that I have a bit of an impatient streak. Certainly Deb and Jennifer will attest to that. I decided to leave the military as a captain at age 23, 2 days after meeting with my career manager, when I was told that I'd have to wait 25 years until I'd be considered for a general officer position. I just couldn't see myself being happy waiting that long to be in charge of my own destiny. Incidentally, that's something that my father told me at the time that I graduated from RMC, so I guess he knew his sons. I'll conclude this discussion of my early life learnings by saying that my time as a student at Queen's was also very impactful. It acted as a compression chamber for my re-entry into Canada. A lot had happened while I was out of the country, including the whole FLQ crisis. Also, I needed to learn something about business in order to make a living. The military had been our family business, and I had had no business roles in my business role models in my life. And one final point about my MBA years. I could see that leadership training and experiences that I had gained in my military time far eclipsed that of my fellow students and the management leadership courses taught at the business school. I quickly realized that that was going to be my competitive advantage. So, 2 years after leaving the Army and having finished my MBA, I was out looking for a job. The market was very buoyant, as MBAs were still a novelty. But my resume was a bit odd. No summer or part-time jobs during my undergrad. 3 years of playing cowboys and Indians in Germany. On paper, most employers could not figure it out. But I did have lots of interviews. Perhaps they were just curious. Everywhere I interviewed, I was always asked, so, what relevance is your time in the military to insert industry? Fortunately, my honors math and physics degree from RMC and my MBA from Queen's were well recognized, so I didn't have to explain my education. With respect to my military time, my answer was crystal clear. I know how to manage up and down. Managing down doesn't just mean giving orders. Yes, you do that some of the time, but as a leader, it's more about creating the right motivational environment. I have attention to detail. I have worked in a persistent, mission-focused culture, i.e. we would not fail. You'd be surprised how many people in business struggle with the concept of mission and vision. I'm used to, and in fact, thrive on challenges. I know how to analyze problems or a situation in real time. Interestingly, I still use the expression sit rep, and I develop tactics and strategy through a SWOT analysis, i.e. I know how to plan. I know how to make decisions, again, in real time. Also how to adjust in the face of changing circumstances in real time. I've had a boatload of formal and informal leadership training. In fact, I'd held leadership positions with large numbers of people since my late teens. I have self-discipline, loyalty, and dedication to the team. I have lived and worked internationally, which in the 1970s was still a rarity. And they loved it when I called them sir. Hey, a little respect does go a long way and makes an impression. I don't think that those attributes of a military officer have changed one iota since 1973. The list has only expanded and become more relevant with more emphasis on the international perspective, more experience with complex strategies. In my day, we still use Morse code. And of course, far more exposure to real life and death situations and decisions made in combat. To my good fortune, several people were intrigued, and I had multiple job opportunities. My first job was in a small office, only 4 employees. I told my mother that I started second from the top. Actually, it was second from the bottom. Within the first week, my new company changed its name and moved offices. I'm sure my non-business parents thought their errant son had just joined a big fly-by-night Ponzi scheme. So the next 41 years in business were a ball and flew by in no time. When you analyze my career, you'll see a distinct pattern, a series of 5 to 7 year stints at the helm of companies in various industries: financial services, real estate, M&A, high-tech, energy, private equity, and eventually pension management. I would join an organization when it was small. I'd lead the transformation into an industry leader through internal and external growth. Think of it like a whole series of postings, just they were a little longer than the normal 2 to 3 year posting. Over and over again, I used the skills that I learned from my experiences during my 7.5 years in uniform. Sure, they were refined for the corporate world, but the basic skills, essentially understanding the value of leadership and a clear focus on mission, vision, and values, were the foundation of any success that I've enjoyed, proving to me that you really are what you were. Leading the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan at the end of my career was truly a privilege. There are only a few opportunities in Canada to head a leading global giant. Our team's record as the world's #1 performer in investments and customer service over the last 2 decades speaks for itself and is recognized by world leaders. It was an amazing platform from which to engage with the world. Teachers was and still is #1 in the world. But the satisfaction that I get from knowing that we made a sustained positive difference in the lives of nearly 350,000 Ontarians is what is most gratifying. Depuis de raccrocher mes pistolets d'entreprise en 2014, mon temps est essentiellement consacré à la philanthropie au Canada et l'étranger, bénévolant et de services communautaires dans le cadre de mon travail comme Chancellor at Queen's, where I get to interact with young people like you, transitioning to adulthood and all that entails. Chair of the Toronto General and Western Hospital Foundation, where I get to witness incredible medical breakthroughs by leading medical scientists. Honorary Colonel of 32 Signal Regiment. This honorary appointment and the expedition that I did to the North Pole in support of wounded veterans was my opportunity to reconnect with the military and to honor my father's legacy. And finally, as chair of the MasterCard Foundation, one of the world's largest foundations whose mandate is to lead transformative change in Africa. In its 10-year history, the foundation has invested $2.5 billion, and its programs have touched over 30 million impoverished Africans. And our impact for change is just beginning. The balance of my time is spent supporting Deb, who continues in her own successful business career. Newsflash, she just gave notice of her retirement next year. Traveling. Deb and I trek together in far-flung places in the world with many more destinations on our bucket list. And playing with 5, plus 1 on the way, I'm told, grandkids, 4 of whom are here today: Cedar, Sydney, Travis, and AJ. Let me wrap up by pointing out that, consistent with my "You are what you were" theme, all 3 of your honorees were exposed at one time or other to the college motto of truth, duty, and valor. And you can trace many of our characteristics from those words. Truth. I think of it as authenticity, or truth to self. Being honest with others and with yourself. Now listen, it doesn't just mean don't tell lies. That's a given. You also need to be honest about your capabilities and your weaknesses. And don't commit what you have no chance of delivering, because others will be counting on you. Duty, a sense of moral commitment to someone or something. Note that citizenry and contribution to a civil society is a common attribute that today's 3 inductees share. Incidentally, I also just realized that another common thread is that we were all honorary colonels at one time. And then finally, valor, boldness or determination in the face of great danger. That certainly applies to General Simonds and Colonel Lamontagne. My closing anecdote, and even though it has been over 50 years since my recruit term early morning parade, I still keep my neckties tied, fully tied, with a double Windsor knot, in order to save 60 seconds dressing every morning. I'm not sure if it was the same for Guy and Gilles, but perhaps it's that extra minute every day, an extra 300 hours over our careers that really gave us the leg up. You are what you were. Je tiens à retirer notre gratitude pour le collège et les classes de 63 pour le grand honneur Truth Duty Valour. Thank you.